All right, welcome to the regular Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, August 7th. And we'll start with roll call.
Thank you. Would like to welcome Bob Spears back to the commission. So I will call your name, Bob Spears. Okay. Commissioner Pevsner, he is absent. Commissioner Pascal, he is an excused absence. Friarman Hunt.
Here.
Commissioner Buckles,
Here.
Goldstein,
Here.
and Chair Desai.
Here. And the next item, approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, moving on to approval of the minutes of July 17th. So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain, wasn't here.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we have
Is that
2 who abstained, 3
three?
yes. I think
Yes.
we're good.
You're good for,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
you've got a
good.
quorum and you've got a majority of quorum.
Okay.
All right, so we have reached the part of the meeting here for audience comments. So at this time, any person may address the planning commission concerning any items not listed on the agenda. The planning commission welcomes your participation input. When addressing the planning commission, please begin by stating your name and address for the record, and limit your comments to no more than 4 minutes in order to provide for an orderly and timely meeting. And seeing no rush to the podium here, we will close audience comments at this time and move on to the discussion items for tonight.
Yes, thank you. Your first item is consideration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CCNRs, for the Mariposa Sierra Vista condominium project, which is tract map 72293, and the address is 407-413 Mariposa Avenue. At your meeting last year, in August of 2013, the commission voted to approve the CUP for this project, a 7-unit condominium project, and the tentative tract map, 1302. And you made your recommendation to the city council. The city council in their November 2013 meeting voted to approve the project. As part of the review and approval process of the final tract map, the applicant is required to obtain planning commission approval of the CCNRs for the project. The review and approval by the planning commission is simply a procedural requirement. It's perfunctory of the municipal code for condo developments to ensure that the CCNRs are consistent and they conform to the project as it was approved. They're included herein. They include a lot of information, but includes the obligation of the property owners, the homeowners association, assessments, approval of improvements on the site, etc. With that, staff has reviewed it as well as the city attorney, and we find that the CCNRs are consistent. There's nothing that is out of conformance to the project that was approved, and we would recommend that you approve the resolution that approves the CCNRs.
Okay. So Danny, how do you want us to kind of go, do you want us to just, if we have any
Unless-
comments or?
Any comments or questions or any discussion? Otherwise, if you're ready to approve it, that's...
I'll open it to the commission here.
That was completely fascinating reading. But I didn't see anything. I
The
looked back.
part about vicious dogs?
I like the part about
versus-
noxious odors personally. And no screaming or slamming doors. I did look back, I wasn't on the planning commission when this was approved, but I did look back at the minutes from that meeting, so I had a sense of what kind of was going on.
Okay.
So I think this is fine, you see.
I had one question. I have my notes. That's section 3-1-B-5, and I'm having trouble scrolling to it on my document
Dash
here.
1.
Yeah, I should have, page 27
Oh.
of the document. but-
3.01.
Here we go.
The Roman numeral 27, or?
Page 27 of
It was
our-
27 of the Adobe file, but that's not coming up for some reason on my screen, so.
What is it?
3-1, it's page 27 of the Adobe file, but like almost there, hang on.
Is it 3.01?
Unit use, here we go.
Oh, okay, here, we have
Okay.
it. Mhm.
So, 3-1. The clause was that it can't be used as a hotel.
Right.
Here it is, okay, to section 5.
5.
So 3.01-B-5. No owner may lease a unit for hotel, motel, or transient purposes, or any other purpose inconsistent with provisions of the declaration. So my only question is for services like Airbnb that are suddenly becoming more vogue, is it clear how these things apply? Are those considered hotel uses, not hotel uses? Can they use Airbnb to let out their unit for limited amounts of time? How is that? Because I think that's more and more an issue, and it's coming up in other cities.
Sure. Airbnbs and these exchange type uses are actually they're not allowed in our code in terms of the multifamily residential zone, which this is located in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's considered short-term stay, which is anything less than a 30-day time period,
Mm-hmm.
which usually they can rent them for a day, or they can rent them for 2 days or a week. And it's simply not permitted.
Okay, so is that clear? Does everybody understand that? Does everybody know that?
Yes.
I don't know that they do. That's why I'm having.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's not referenced, but I think going forward, I don't think people
Right.
think of Airbnb and hotel
Right.
use as the same, but I think from a visibility standpoint we may have an opinion. I have to make sure that the public has an opinion and they understand that those things are not gonna be okay. So I don't know that it needs to be changed. I just, for the record, would like people to understand
Right.
that when they're using Airbnb to let out their home for short periods of time, that would be considered a hotel use, and that's not permitted in these
Not
districts.
And that's only for this CCNR, it's not for the city as a whole?
Well, it's for both. I mean, it's included in the CCNRs, but our own city's zoning guidelines don't allow this. It's not a permissible use in the multifamily residential zone. So if we were to hear of this to occur, we would say it's prohibited. It cannot occur. And it is something I think we probably separately from this, we need to grapple with that, because it's obviously a current trend, and it's happening, and it's sort of this unregulated business that's
On
occurring.
my street alone, I know of 2.
Right. So.
Except for the exception of historical buildings that get a permit to operate as a bed and breakfast.
Right, that would be the exception. If it
Yeah.
Well,
were.
is it in multi-family zones where it's prohibited, or all residential
Even in
zones?
single family,
It
it's
is.
prohibited. I mean, you can rent your home or a
Yeah.
condominium, but no less than a 30-day stay, you know.
I think the residents of the city should be educated about that in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why I brought it up tonight, because it wasn't clear to
It
me,
doesn't
and,
have to do with this in particular, but it's.
yeah, it
something
jumped
that-
out because of that clause, but I think it needs to be a broader concept, and
Mhm.
I don't know what's right or what's wrong, but it certainly needs to be defined, perhaps in the context of the general plan and any municipal code text amendments that are gonna follow.
Or did you know section from Development Services to the citizens? You know?
Okay.
Mhm.
There's some places
That's
where
good.
people, it's not, Airbnb is pretty popular, and so they
Mhm.
figured since it exists, it must be okay, so, then next thing you know, there's some emotional problems.
Right.
Rather avoid that.
Okay.
All right. Moving forward, do you have any?
That was my only comment.
I had a question, actually. On Article 7, architectural control. Basically, section 7.03.
What page?
Page 40 of the PDF.
Okay.
And the question is, it talks about if alterations are made to any particular unit, interior or otherwise, that it comes before the architectural committee, which is a subsection of the board
Right.
for that condo development. But it doesn't really mention, and I don't know if it's just explicit or understood, that it sounds as if the approval is on the committee and it's internal, but if it affects, building code or, they do something else, that they would have to bring
Sure.
plans, because it talks about showing your plans to the board or the architectural committee for approval for colors or alterations or changes. Does that have to come to development services? And if so, is that just understood?
No, it would require both. So this would be, a requirement of the HOA or the board, but any external changes, so this doesn't, this is a CCNRs that are required per the homeowners association or the board.
Okay.
And they would still, it doesn't relieve them from whatever city requirements are.
Okay.
So if there are external changes that either require a building permit or, require any kind of design, to ensure that it meets building code or whatever standards we have here. We don't have a design review in the city, but if it in any way requires an alteration that's substantial enough that it has to go before a commission or further review, we review it.
Okay, but so that sort of language, because there's other places where they do refer to like an applicable codes and regulations of the state or whatever.
State or local, yes.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that, I don't know, reading in through this architectural guidelines section or the committee, I didn't see anything where, if you're gonna do anything substantial, short of putting paint on the walls or something,
Mhm.
but if you start, altering that, you would also need
You'd
to
also need
meet
to.
state and federal, or local, state and federal building code or guidelines, whatever that may entail, and I
Sure.
don't know. I know you're saying it's as an internal looking document where it's really about, governing those 7 condo units, but I don't know if that would be appropriate or if that's just understood. I didn't get that reading this, that, I kept asking myself that, but, like,
Well, the distinction between these CCNRs and the city's regulations are, the CCNRs are a contract between the person that buys the condominium and the condominium association as a whole. So they're like rules. If you want to live here, you have to obey all these rules. And this particular provision, if a condominium owner wanted to make some modification to their unit, before they could even go to, what this is saying is, before you could even though it is unsaid,
Yeah.
the implication is, before you could even go to the city to pull a building permit or go through the city's regulatory process, and regardless of what the city says would be okay to do, you can't do that to your unit unless our architectural committee, approves it first. So that's really the purpose of this provision in the CCNRs. And then that, which kind of begs the question, is there a provision in the city's processes for when someone comes in with an application for a building permit and they want to do something to a condo?
Do you have the permission of your board?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Do you know?
We rarely have any condominiums that come through, but we would ask that, especially if it's a condominium. I think a lot of our staff is aware that, they're required to have, we always remind people that if there's any CCNRs, which are private agreements, that they need to make sure that they're
Meeting the-
consistent with them.
or meeting the obligations
Sure.
on us first.
Can I ask an overview question? From the city attorney, what is it that you look for when you look at these CCNRs?
I generally look to see if, just because normally I wouldn't even read someone's CCNRs, but because.
We do.
Exactly.
So, that's why I'm asking you.
Because it's a private contract, but
Right.
because it's a requirement to review them, what I look at is to see if the same kinds of provisions that are commercially reasonable and that you normally see are there. I'm looking to see if the treatment of garages and where you keep your car and that sort of thing is consistent with the conditions of approval, if so. I'm looking to see what kinds of nuisance or abatement controls the homeowners association gives itself. I'm not interested in seeing whether the assessment is fair or not, or the procedure for that. I'm really looking at things that have to do with maintenance of the unit and who has the control and power over that, and also to make sure that there's nothing in there that suggests that it's really all on the city. If there's a problem, the city's gonna fix it. I look for those kinds of things.
Is there some boilerplate language that we can ask them to put in there that separates the city from the internal machinations of that board? Because that's what I look for, is like, what is the city on the hook for here? And it
Right, yeah.
didn't seem like that much, so it's like, okay, why am I reading this?
The city's really not on the hook, and nor should it be,
Right.
for anything in the CCNRs, and that's one of the things I'm looking for when I look at them, to see if something got snuck in there, implying in any way that the real enforcement is going to be the city as opposed to the homeowners association, because the city has better things to do
Right.
than get involved in a,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Limited resources.
Exactly. So I'm looking for that, and there are no there's no standard language that I think would be appropriate or that you really expect to read in a CCNR, such as in the beginning, the city has no,
We don't know you.
no enforcement, yeah, you don't need to see anything like that. No one would expect that, because in a CCNR, the person buying the condominium who's handed the
Right.
package, oh, sorry. The person who's handed the CCNR is assuming that they read them. They're not expecting that the city has anything to do with it. They want to know things like, well, what are my assessments?
Right.
How can they be raised? What things does the homeowner association cover, and what things are on me? If I want to change something, what's the process? And so those are the how many dogs can I have? I thought it was interesting in
Two.
these CNRs, yeah, that you can't have an aquarium or above 35 gallons. CCNRs are, run the gamut of restrictions. When you get down into the weeds of that specific, that's pretty restrictive, but that's not the thing that I'm reading for or care about. I notice it, because at the end of the day, it's an agreement between the homeowners association and the individual owner. The homeowners association will enforce a violation as they see fit, and the city stays out of it. It's a civil matter between the owner and the association.
Yeah, because when I read it, I look for things that can trap the city into
Yep.
doing something, and if I don't see it, they can.
That's what I'm looking for.
I had one other question, which I just remembered. In Exhibit B, which is on page 71 of the PC packet, it's the maintenance schedule. It lists who's responsible, whether it's the association or the owner.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it lists landscaping on the balcony or patio as being the responsibility of the owner, but it doesn't list the general landscaping otherwise as being the responsibility of the association, which I expect it would be, right? And maybe I just went by because it's a really long list.
There was a provision in Exhibit B where if you have landscaping, I'm going by memory, landscaping in your patio area or.
You're responsible for
that
it, yeah.
you're responsible for that. I did notice that, but
But the
yes, you're correct.
General
Common
landscaping.
common area landscaping should be the homeowners association's
And it's not on
responsibility.
this list, and maybe it should be.
It probably should be if it's
I
not.
think it
I
should be
think
on
it
this
talks
list.
about it in the document,
Uh-huh.
but, you're right, it's not on the list, but I do recall in the document where it parses out what's,
Who does
co-
it? Yeah,
what's
and I sort of think so.
purview of the association, because it's
Yeah.
a common area,
Mm-hmm.
all common areas.
But since it's got this maintenance schedule,
But yeah.
it seems like it ought to be on this list, I'm thinking.
You would definitely expect it to be.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, especially since it's so specific. It talks about door casing.
I know, because it lists the other kind of landscaping, it just begs the question, okay.
Right.
Front door light bulb.
Yeah,
You're saying just really after this?
Right.
Is there any way that the city can ask them to be more aggressive about like the street trees and things like that that border the condominium that would?
What's your standard practice for?
You meaning the parkway or?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I have to find out whether, and I'm trying to remember whether we are responsible for, that they're not responsible for the trimming of those trees. You know,
The, unless city ordinance already makes the
That'd be
adjacent
property.
property owner
Mhm.
responsible for some degree of tree trimming and sidewalk care and
They're
that
no
sort of
different
thing.
than the other.
Right.
Correct, would be no different.
Too bad.
Otherwise, we would have missed the chance to impose that as a condition of approval, which certainly would have been a reasonable condition of approval.
and we
So,
haven't.
if we wanted to do that in the future, how does that happen?
As part of the project, when it comes before you,
Yeah,
you make that a condition of approval.
I can tell you that when Los Angeles Unified School District built 1,100 new schools, the city of Los Angeles said, we will put in and take care of the street trees and the sidewalks.
Mhm.
And that all got pushed onto the school district.
Mhm.
And that, so, I mean, there's, in a city with limited resources, I think that might be a,
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back to, in section 2.05, which is on page 27, repair and maintenance of the property by association. And there it references Exhibit B.
Mm.
It doesn't list,
2.05?
yeah,
Can you go back to, what is the number again?
2.05.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because in one point here, it also says landscaping or potted plants are prohibited on balconies.
Mm-hmm,
But the maintenance of those is the responsibility of.
yeah.
So it's
So
kind of.
I think this is, unless it shows up someplace else, this seems to be a major
An omission.
omission here. 'Cause I would think that's the section where it would be, right?
Division, maintenance, and insurance.
Repair and maintenance of the property by association, 2.05.
Mm-hmm.
You could certainly request or really direct that clarification be made. Somebody's got to be taking care of the
I think it
common
needs
area
to be-
landscaping.
Put in here and in the chart as well.
Mhm. You could potentially, I mean, if you're considering approval of the CCNRs, you could approve it subject to that clarification being added to, and then staff would go back and talk to the applicant and may have that correction made. I can't imagine that, there's no grounds for them to refuse it, and I can't
So-
imagine that they would.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, it should definitely, I mean, maybe it's in here in some other location, but that seems to me the location where it obviously would
Yeah.
be,
I don't see
I
it.
don't remember
Located.
seeing it. I don't remember seeing it when I was reviewing it.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, if we're gonna ask them to modify the document, maybe we should ask them to put some language in concerning the Architectural Review Board, in that it somehow passes by the city.
Okay.
I don't want them, we don't want them to think that that's all they gotta get, their own approval.
That's kind of was my
Yeah.
point with
Yeah.
that.
And that's how I read it as well.
Yeah. That was in section 7, or.
Okay, I get that.
I
That it's
like
not the
that.
only thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna, but I think this reference to the association maintaining all the common grounds
Common area.
should be in section 2.05 and also in that table, whatever it was called, Appendix B or something.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, Exhibit B.
Do we have anything else? Bill, did you have anything? or- All right. to open it to public comment?
Sure.
So at this time, we'll open it up to public for comment on this discussion item. Seeing no rush, we will close the public comment section, bring it back to the commission. So, we got the couple comments, I mean.
Yeah,
notes.
we've had the comments, and if you're good with that,
Yeah.
we could go back to the owner applicant and, go over these comments with them and have it revised.
Okay.
But you could approve the resolution tonight with those amendments.
Conditions?
Yeah.
Okay. Looking for a motion to
I'm
approve with conditions?
Fine to, motion to approve with the changes that have been discussed.
All right, second?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So your second discussion item?
Yes, their second item.
This is really in two parts. The first item is the water conservation policies and the general plan update, as it relates to the general plan update, and also the implementation program is the second part. So I'll begin with water conservation policies and how it relates to the general plan update. The city council approved the moratorium ordinance at their meeting on July 8th, which prohibits the issuance of building permits and land use permits, permit applications for the construction or development of new construction where development would require a new water service connection. The ordinance took immediate effect as a 45-day moratorium, and it will expire on August 22nd, 2014. The council is meeting on August 12th and will be considering the extension, which would be up to 22 months and 15 days until July 26, 2016. During this time that the moratorium is extended, the city is required to develop a plan. And this plan consists of a list of possible programs or regulations that would be studied and used to adopt new permanent water conservation regulations as it applies to new construction. What staff has done is prepared a list of possible water conservation policies, and it's attached as Exhibit A, that could be considered and implemented, and other practices that also relate to water conservation. The city council, at their August 12th meeting, will be looking at the same list, and we'll be providing staff direction on which policies by priority that they wish to be considered. So I thought it was opportune to give you these policies, really intended as an introduction to the Planning Commission and to keep you apprised of this list. If the commission has any suggested additions, any questions, or perhaps any new ideas when we develop this list, staff will forward them on August 12th to the City Council for their consideration as well. You'll see in this list that there are a number of policies written where they would require amending the general plan and the zoning code. And for those policies, understand that will be something that will be fully vetted and reviewed by the Planning Commission, because it's required that it be reviewed by this body and then recommended to the City Council. So we will receive direction from the council regarding that on August 12th, but I thought, again, that this is a good time to show you. We did bring this to the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Commission, and they had some suggestions, but pretty much felt that they were consistent with what they felt was necessary. But it'll be a matter of policy to what extent the City Council and what exact policies they want to look at. Regarding the general plan, as you know, we're all, you've reviewed the general plan, you've gone through the major sections like land use, even water resources, and I think it's an opportune time now to revisit particular sections that, in light of this water conservation effort and this serious emergency conditions that we have now, that we can modify policies within those documents. We're happy to bring them back to you as it is, and then you can brainstorm as to where they could be inserted, or staff can review these, make suggestions, and bring you back these particular sections and say, we've taken a look at it, and for your review. So that's kind of a question I have for you. So that's really that. And so the list you have, and I thought, if you have, that's kind of part one. If you have any questions regarding this list or any other suggestions or additions, and maybe I'll end right here, and if you want to look at the list, then we'll go to the next item.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good for us to talk about this and then kind of
Okay.
dovetail in.
Let me ask one question. Let's say that we agree with all these items.
Yes.
How arduous would that be to modify the general plan draft at this time for all of these?
Well, it'd be implementation, right? A lot of
It would be implementation. Certainly when you're looking at these policies, a lot of these are action items that we would want to actually implement. But you also want to make sure that the general plan is consistent with these. And so it's important to go back and look at them and make sure that whether you have existing policies in the general plan that already support these kind of action items,
Uh-huh.
I think it's important to do that
Okay.
now,
Okay.
as we're completing this general plan update.
Right.
It's an extensive list, and that's why we're asking, not only you, but the city council to give us a priority and order, and then we would schedule out these things, because we know that it has to come before you. There's going to be public hearings, there's going to be, for example, if we're going to look at modifying single-family residential development standards as it applies to water conservation, I'm sure we'll be looking at other factors that have always been, an issue. For example, the square feet limit of 4,000 that's currently, I know it was brought up, and we have it agendized actually for the second meeting in September, but, it makes sense to suggest these changes now.
Okay, I have a question. If I come into the development services tomorrow and I pull up plumbing permit to do major modification, or if I'm doing one of these remodels in Sierra Madre where 3 of the walls fall down and I save the back wall and rebuild the house, the water appliances that I must install in this remodel are all conservation approved, correct?
Correct.
And how about the irrigation system? Is it required to put in an irrigation system that senses the need for water? Is that one of the requirements?
Not right now.
Can that be made as part of our agenda? Because 70% of the water that we want to save is going out on plants.
Yeah, landscape.
And whatever we can do to automate that so that it's no secret that I suggested that there be an inspection on point of sale. And if we can ask that new construction and remodel construction include a water sensor on the irrigation system. Bill and I run in the morning through Sierra Madre, and it's very disheartening when you're running in the rain and people are watering their lawn. It seems like a waste. And so,
That's one of the items here too, actually, is the.
yeah, if we can
Property inspection.
push the housing units in town to be more efficient automatically, and I think we will begin to solve some of this problem.
Yeah.
Where did this list come from?
This list came from, actually a lot of listening from, as we led to this moratorium that was established.
Mhm.
I started jotting down, attending these council meetings and hearing people from the audience saying that, we should do this or we should do that. And then just brainstorming among staff as well, because, so it has come from various sources, but we
I'm just
kind of
wondering-
made a laundry list of them,
Yeah.
and.
I mean, I'm wondering if you've looked at any water conservation policies from other cities in California that have really restricted water problems.
Not yet. We're beginning to, like we began with
I don't know
the,
if, you know, there are some cities that have some really good
Right.
policies already, but if they already exist somewhere,
right,
it's always nice to steal if you can.
if you recall, we started looking at gray water, but in fact, at the time, there were a few cities that we found that had manuals that says this is how you can do it,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but there weren't rules requiring them
Mhm.
to install gray water, or they haven't gone that far yet.
Is gray water gonna be that significant a contributor? It's pretty much gonna be out of the washing machine, it's not much else, right?
It depends on
Well, it
how,
depends,
how
yeah.
complex the system is. If you're doing new construction, you may want to have your entire plumbing system.
I mean, you can take
Um,
tub water too.
You could take
Take
tub
tub
water.
water,
So if
sink
it's
water,
on new
it just
construction, I
can't
guess
be-
it could be significant. On old construction, it's pretty much gonna
Old
be,
construction, challenging, because,
But it can be done.
okay.
yeah.
I mean, the only thing you can't do is black water, which is out of your toilet.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then, and you can't store gray water, it's gotta go into the ground.
And more than 24 hours.
So, in the rainy season, it's, doesn't do you much,
Right. So there's the ability to, to shut off the diverter valve,
There have been a number of places where people have accumulated rainwater in tanks
Mm-hmm.
on the property and then irrigated with that later on.
Right.
Is that anywhere in our
Yeah.
list?
Well, it's on the list here
On the
Yeah.
list.
for rainwater capture.
Yeah.
Um,
Once again, that's better done with new construction than,
Right.
I mean, you gotta think you get I wanna say a 2-for-1 in the sense of, it's not a lot of water you'd capture in gray water, I mean,
right?
fixtures, but it's not only what you capture and then put back out, that's that much less that you're using clean water to landscape, so you
Right.
kinda,
And it's also saving your sanitation system a little process.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I thought this list was pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of interesting ideas. I mean, a couple of things even that I was thinking about, that I don't know why, it happens a lot on my street, is the parkways themselves that are irrigated and watered and have these lush green strips of grass. I mean, and I did see that in here, that look at restricting, and I don't know if it's one of those quasi-funny things where it's the parkway's city territory, but
But often.
most residential
residents take care
have,
of it.
a lot of them have irrigation sprinklers to it too that are watering it, and a lot of it runs off into the street,
Right.
It would be neat to see, and there's a lot of, I mean, I'll give credit, there's a lot of residents you run by or drive by that there is no grass and it's sort of native or left,
Mhm.
which would be interesting to see. I know that's only a little piece of real estate, but, I mean, citywide, I don't know why we would be manicuring and watering those things when we don't have water, but I saw that on here. One idea I wanted to add, which kind of dovetailed with Gina's looking at the total square footage, and I don't know quite how to look at it, but I'd like to discuss it, is, in these new constructions, we've seen a few come before us where bathrooms outnumber bedrooms, where every bedroom has this ensuite
Mhm.
in addition to common wet facilities, and so I'm not sure of a crafty way of
Mhm.
saying, you can only have X amount, but I would like to discuss the possibility of limiting or looking at, based on the size of the home or the whatever, that there's an appropriate number of bathrooms, I think it's always suspect when we've seen some cases where 6.5 bathrooms and 5 bedrooms, and-
Sure.
and,
I was also thinking about, I mean, maybe it's not that much water, but, really big bathtubs. Those kind of gigantic those giant soaking bathtubs,
Mhm.
And pools.
And pools.
pools, hot
Pools.
tubs,
Jacuzzis.
Yeah, they,
jacuzzis,
a
all
lot
the
of
same.
evaporation there.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I've got a pool in my backyard, and I feel horrible about it.
You should.
Is it full?
Put a cover.
It's full, it's full,
put a
we
cover
don't
on it.
even hardly ever use it.
Is there a
but
cover?
It came with the house,
I mean, that's another thing, like, the
Mhm.
pools are large.
I don't know if it's on this list, but I did remember hearing,
Requiring.
perhaps prohibit new pools.
yeah.
You know, I've read this entire list, and I'm all for saving stormwater and gray water. But then I start to think we're dictating to people their use of water. Maybe we should be restricting the amount of water they get during droughts. Maybe that's the key rather than,
You mean all of a sudden their thing just automatically goes off and they're dry
Yeah.
for a couple of days?
yeah.
Actually,
I think there'd be some health consequences to that.
what I was thinking, not quite along that line, but parallel to that line is, we need a rationale for, if we're restricting the size and the appliances in a home, if we start backwards with how much can we reasonably expect, the city of Sierra Madre has its own water supply, and how much water can we reasonably expect out of that supply, given its current nature? And divide that by the number of households. And you get a sense that, okay, a household in Sierra Madre should be using X amount. And then what does it take? I mean, if you're gonna have 7 bathrooms, then you better have a concrete, parkway or whatever, but that there's a reasonable amount of water that is available to everyone that they can expect and can plan around. And, in the old days, we used to have our own, before we hooked up to MWD, we had our own wells, and the wells would, produce so much, and we had an expectation, and actually, we kind of muddled along for a lot of years. But I think in the last 5 or 10 years, we have developed houses or families that have wanted more water than the city could produce. And so maybe the question to ask is, well, what's the reasonable number that the city of Sierra Madre is willing to produce or buy? And then work backwards from that.
And it's only during drought years, 5 years from now, when the drought's over, we're not gonna be talking about this. Everybody's gonna be using
Well,
the
but
same
the-
Yeah,
amount of water
the
again.
But the problem is, you can't predict drought.
No.
It's
I know.
impossible to predict drought. And what happens is, you have a drought, and then everybody, after years of drought, suddenly people say, whoa, we have a water problem. And then the water comes back, and then everybody plants their grass back and starts
Yeah.
watering a ton and has their pools and everything. And chances are that it's throughout the history of California, drought has been a normal occurrence.
Cycle.
It's a cyclical thing, and maybe it's coming more closely now. But if we set policies that assume drought, because it's gonna come around again, and if development gets more dense, then the issues of drought are worse. And I think that as a baseline, you assume drought.
But I think also, I don't know, I take the approach that we should implement policies that, in some senses, change behavior, because droughts aren't like a 6-month thing, they can go on. I mean, we're in years, and you develop habits and patterns. Like, I would agree that you would go back to some other way of doing it if we were at abundant water, but I think also you develop patterns where once you've done it that way, or lived with less water, or consumed less, or altered things that
I
you don't
agree.
necessarily go back overnight, and I think
You're right.
these policies shouldn't be about putting people in a box of saying, you've got to do all this. It's more about altering behavior and pattern,
Yeah.
And
And
expectations.
we're actually in a interesting place because we have our own water department.
Yeah.
And we can ask them, what is a reasonable expectation for the citizens? And then
You're
see.
making a pretty dramatic statement that we have to live within our
Within our
own
means.
boundaries. No, it's not within our means. I mean, commodities are traded.
Okay, so then if the city as a whole wants to begin to trade, and, which is, in this case, purchase water from an outside source, which is what they're doing now, then that should be part of the deal. We should put that in the equation at the get-go, that, okay, well, we have X amount of water that we can produce locally, and we're going to buy X amount after that, and let's try to live within that means. And then, what does that mean? And so the question is, what does that mean for the average household? Does that mean that, right now, it means that, people don't flush their toilets all the time, and the grass is brown. But hopefully we can get to a standard at the times where the city wells can provide the water with maybe some supplemental, contribution from MWD, and we can figure out what that right point is. I mean, it doesn't have to be the point where where no one's flushing their toilet and everything is brown, but it can be something in between. But we really don't know what that level is right now. All we know is that we're doing the Chicken Little thing because there's a drought. But our wells have been going down for years. I mean, we've been drawing out more than we've been able to replenish for quite a while. And somewhere there's that's why we had to go to MWD. The pipeline from MWD has been underneath that street for decades.
Yeah.
But, we finally come to the point where we can't squeeze any more water out of the ground. So what is a reasonable expectation for the city of Sierra Madre in terms of how much water can we produce and give to the citizens or buy?
Yeah, I guess I don't see it, I see us as part of a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I see us as part of a larger ecosystem, which is city, county, state. And so I think that certainly we have to set reasonable expectations for ourselves, but we don't live in a vacuum.
We are very lucky in that the MWD pipe is there. And we even...
No question, we would be a non-entity without that pipe.
Correct. And we even have some, I guess, access through Arcadia for some water, but not a lot. But, if that MWD pipe had not been there, this would have been a problem, 10 years ago. We would have been trying to solve this problem. Because we would have realized that we don't have the access that we wished we had.
Right, we would have come to the conclusion that we have to be connected to the rest of the world in order to continue.
Or
to
use
function
less water.
economically.
Even if
Or
we're-
use less water.
But there are things besides, all of our communities are interconnected. They're interconnected on infrastructure, they're interconnected on commodities, they're interconnected on police enforcement. I mean, we all work together on these things. We're not independent.
But that doesn't give us the right to use as much as we want to.
I completely agree.
And so the question still goes back to, what can we reasonably use and expect for the citizens? In other words, if you bought a house here tomorrow and asked, how much water can the city provide me? What is that?
Maybe you wouldn't move
If I
it.
may, the city actually has that very data. It exists. And the city has adjudicated groundwater rights, and that's limited. It is a limited commodity, it is indeed. And it also has the right to take, in addition to its adjudicated groundwater rights, it has the right to take additional water out to the extent that it can spread it. The city's current needs or use of water is, I believe, around 3,000 acre-feet a year. But specifically, the information or the data that you were interested in, which is what's the average amount that each household uses, that is actually data that the city is now required to develop in a monthly report starting October 1st due to the emergency regulations that the State Water Board came up with. So we'll actually know, we'll have that very data every month starting in October, and it's a look back of the month before, so it will be very, very recent data. So if that's data that would help you in developing any kind of water regulations, it's coming.
Okay, because, we see plans for, I want to build a 7-bedroom house with a pool. We never thought about water as being a issue before, but now we can say, well, I can do the pool and the 7 bathrooms, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that water's an interesting thing, because in a way it is a commodity, but the rules around water are extremely arcane and peculiar. And I'll have to do an awful lot with historical precedent and whatnot.
And rights.
Who got there first and who got the water rights, and then you have all this water that's, moved around the state, and most of it goes to agriculture, right?
Yeah, 85%.
Yeah. It's the same thing in our houses. Most of it is going to the agricultural purpose, to watering stuff. And I think to me, this is kind of the essential part of it, is landscaping. How you're gonna,
Mitigate that.
control how much water gets used in landscaping. Now, there's a lot of things people can do, excuse me, and plant that don't use as much water as grass, that can serve some, sort of the same purposes. And I think that it's mentioned here in several ways, but I think the issues around landscaping, about how we're gonna handle controlling water use in landscape, is really essential. And I think, I have some specific notes about things that were on here. One was about consider a cap on how much turf is used in yard areas based on a percentage of the size of the lot. And I actually think that there ought to be a cap irregardless of the size of the lot, so that, if you have a giant lot and you get to put, 20% compared to a tiny lot, you get 20%. I think that needs to be looked at more carefully. Also, the thing about replacing turf in parkways and front yards with decomposed granite, I think it should be permeable surfaces and drought-resistant
Yeah.
planting. Because there's a bazillion plants you can plant that don't even require barely any water. I've been putting them in my garden, and it's amazing how some of them are completely thriving, and the ones that aren't making it with little water are dying, and I'm trying again. So,
Yeah.
so I think this is really important, that there may have to be something about, list of plants that,
I was, if I can tack on to that, I was, in reading through this list, I was doing some research, and I found this great, and I meant to forward it to you, but San Diego County, their water district, developed this, it's actually an e-zine, so it's on an e-mag, but it's like this pamphlet that talks about implementation down to like what sort of plant species you could put in your parkway that don't take,
DWP
it's a
and-
great little, very comprehensive, but very user-friendly. Like, I feel part of it's implementing policy, but I think there's, maybe it's just me, but sort of an education too, having access to like, okay, I can't have turf, what can I have, or what can I put? Or if I just make these small couple adjustments, like that would save X amount or whatever. I know it's all stuff we talk about, but if there was something I could get a hold of that would educate me in a way that I understood, not just something like, MWD's got a little brochure up here in a pocket, but I mean, I think that's part of it too, is educating folks on what can be done that's simple,
And I think, I'm pretty sure that the LADWP has some good materials about this. The LA County Arboretum has information about that, I think, and my favorite,
This one.
Theodore Payne Foundation for California Native Plants is an incredible resource about this kind of stuff. Yeah, native plants, they grow with the water that there is.
What would you suggest, for instance, I forgot the name of the house, the historic house on Highland? It's a large property, it's kind of painted green, I forgot the name of it. Who's the,
Oh, yeah.
it's a historic property?
Just sold recently.
Yeah.
Just sold,
Mhm.
Right.
with a front yard the size of a football field.
Right,
That's
I'm
all
just
grass.
saying.
It's a Jameson
Oh,
estate.
St. Augustine.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Jameson estate. Okay, so what would you suggest to those people, I mean, to that gigantic front yard? I mean, that wouldn't take away from really what that place looks like. Desert, I mean, turn back into the desert that it was.
No, but I think you can have things that look green, that look beautiful, and that are not grass. You
Well,
can
they have-
replace it with things that don't, it's not that it uses zero water, but it could use half the water of a lawn.
Yeah,
You
well, I
know?
mean, you could have artificial grass and this AstroTurf stuff that, I mean, hey, listen.
But
I mean,
you can,
it's-
there are, what's the purpose of a lawn? In some, that was another suggestion I had here, which is that, the city's own landscaping. For instance, the lawn around the city hall is dying, and I presume it'll be replaced with something eventually. That's lawn just for looks, it's not used for playing. Now, the lawn behind here, in the park, you wanna have that for grass, because, people are playing and it serves a
Recreation.
a recreational purpose. But I think like the grass out in front of that house, it's not like people are playing football on it. It's just a look. It's a
Would.
look of greenness.
It would if it was my house.
Yeah,
playing
but-
soccer.
Yeah.
I got
But,
kids.
but it doesn't have to be grass that provides that look of greenness. It could be something that uses way less water and provides the same kind of aesthetic to it. And I think that's the direction people need to learn to go in order to live within the means we have in terms of water. Because grass is used all over the place. I mean, I look at places where it's grass and grass and grass, and doesn't serve the utility that, the specific utility of grass, which is like sitting and running on.
Actually, I like the idea of curbing the use of grass in the parkway, because that's also the one place where the sprinklers water the street.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and if you could at least then move everything back onto the other side of the sidewalk, you may, save a lot of water and save a lot of,
I mean, is that no man's land kind of, is it city purview? Is it homeowner purview? Is it both?
It's a little bit of both, because it is within the parkway, it is the public right-of-way, but again,
Technically,
traditionally.
properties don't start though till.
Right, traditionally, the homeowners have always taken care of whatever landscaping it is in the front. So if if there were rules that prohibited or regulated what can be placed or parked, landscaped, it certainly can be done.
I mean, that would be one where there might be like sort of this,
actually, you don't
Or-
have to dictate what can be planted there, you just can
Say-
dictate that they can't irrigate it.
Mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, you can put whatever you want there, but you
well, I
can't
mean,
water
there
it.
may be another way to go about it. Like, there was a suggestion here of like, rip up turf,
Yeah.
kind of like an incentive to pull up that turf. I mean, if there was a way to sort of say, hey,
If you rip up half of it, you get a.
I mean,
you know, if
parkways,
They're doing that in
we
LA.
want to move the parkways to non-turf, in
And
exchange for ripping it up,
I would, and I would suggest that we look at design standards together with this, because we can prohibit, no turf. We could say no turf, but then we don't want, parkways provide an aesthetic.
It's the front.
Yeah,
You don't want concrete.
it adds to
effect.
the aesthetic and the ambiance of
Yeah.
a neighborhood or a street or a block, and, you want to be careful about, just, having just a blanket prohibition and not have maybe perhaps design standards that you can recommend, because,
And I think that's something we could easily do. I mean, there's so many, I think in here it said convert it to DG, but I think it would be something, like Gina's saying, where it's some sort of native landscape or native,
It would have to resist erosion, for
Right.
steep streets. with
yes, and we have a
parking.
lot of that.
Yeah, and turf holds the dirt.
There's a lot of other,
Dirt runs downhill in heavy rain.
but there's a
but
lot
it-
of other things.
But you
Yeah,
could also
right.
plant like other native grasses,
Yeah.
that in
Bunch
large
grasses.
quantity, like buffalo grass and other Mexican feathergrass, other things that
Yeah.
can become evasive, but would hold down as well,
Sure.
Well, I have a few problems with quite a few of these things, 'cause a lot of these go to cost. Do we want a property owner to have to bring his house up, and it's like, to these low water standards before he can sell it? He's gonna have to know what that's gonna cost. Oh gee, it's gonna cost me more than the commission for the real estate agent, so I gotta build that into the price of my, home to sell it, and that becomes, a purchasing or bargaining chip. Do we want water patrol monitors? Frankly, some neighborhoods have enough nosy neighbors. Don't give them any authority and power, and because, I don't want out there using my house and then someone's out there screaming at me with their broom and they're threatening to call the police and I'm getting cited for it. We already have enough problems up by the park where if you don't turn your tires away from the curb when you park at Sierra Madre Park, it's like you get a ticket, and it's like, welcome to Sierra Madre, here's your ticket, thanks for stopping by and supplying us with revenue. Hope you don't, hope you come back and try and hike the Mount Wilson Trail. Double meters, some of these are quite onerous. Does that mean that when you get a water permit that costs thousands of dollars for a property, it's gonna double that cost? Because now the water company's gonna, or the city may impose a 2-meter fee, which could, what does it cost for some single-family residence? Up to 40 grand just to develop a property between the school fee and all the other things? Some of those things have to be thought out.
Bill, I was the one that promoted the point of sale inspection. And the analogy I used was that 10 years ago, this country was really worried about a gas shortage. In the last 10 years, we've developed cars that use less gas. And now we're a nation that exports fuel. And right now in Sierra Madre, we have a bunch of houses that essentially use more water than we can supply, because the city's water supply won't go to all, can't do what all the houses want to do. And it seems to me that the way we address that is to evolve our housing stock to be a stock that uses less water. And the one time where we have some authority that we can put some pressure on people, and then they have some money in order to do this, is at the point of sale. And maybe we only do, 5% of the houses, I don't know what percentage of the Sierra Madre houses, but over time, what it's going to mean is that we're looking at a stock of houses in Sierra Madre that have low-flow devices and an irrigation system that doesn't use water, and it's done automatically. So whether the person is, a green person, or they are an old person that doesn't know to turn off their irrigation system in the rainy weather, it's going to get done for them. And over time, we will develop a housing stock that requires less water just in its natural state, without even having to ask for specific conservation. And if there's a more elegant way of doing it, I'm all for it, but Pasadena uses point of sale in order to modify it. And it also, to be quite honest with you,
Modify their water use?
they use point of
For
sale to do a
everything.
lot of things.
Mhm.
Remember, we
Unpermitted.
had, we were looking at compliance with, second,
Unpermitted.
Granny flats, yeah.
the.
Unpermitted,
Unpermitted, there are,
Existing
all
non-
kinds of things that are, that we worry about, that we wish we knew about. We have no way of finding out, and if the city council in their wisdom wants to tack that on to the inspection, but I'm only looking at it, is that from this point forward, from the point of sale forward, is this house an efficient house in terms of, is as efficient as it can be in terms of its use of water? So no matter who moves in here, it's going to use less water than it did, previously. And if we can slowly move the stock, and besides, if these people are upset, they're moving anyway. So they can be upset and, go to, Cucamonga. But at least the city of Sierra Madre has, when they're done, has a house that is going to use less water and is going to be less of a drag on the city's limited resources.
Plus, I think, what does, as of now, what do we think using less water means? It means low-flow toilets, right?
Yeah.
It means aerators on your faucets, and it means low-flow showers, which someone can obviously change as soon as they're in there. It's not like you're gonna be inspected all the time. It means some kind of control on the irrigation system to not water during rain. This
But
doesn't
all of
cost.
this is mandated already
Yeah.
by the code.
Yes, it is.
But, yeah, it's mandated, but who knows, it's not happening,
Which
right?
means it should be it's already
But I
required to
think
be part of
that
it.
these are things that
You
aren't
would think
gonna
it
cost a
already would be
fortune.
there,
Yeah.
but you and I both know that there are people that have lived in town for 30 years and it ain't there. And the city's done a pretty reasonable job of, here, I'll give you a new toilet if you bring me back the old one and stuff like that. But when you go out running in the morning, you were out bicycling today, that when, on rainy days, there are people who are watering their lawns in the rain.
Yeah.
Or
no,
it
this is
rained
what-
Saturday night.
I wasn't here, but yeah, go ahead.
It rained Saturday night.
I've seen it, no, the
And
sprinklers are
Sunday-
turned around backwards and spraying the street, no one even turns the thing so it even hits the grass, I
And
hear you.
Sunday, there were people watering their lawn. And if, in the perfect world, we would have wanted, if it rained Saturday night here, there shouldn't be any need to water any lawns in Sierra Madre on that Sunday. We should have the city services should have gotten at least a 1 or 2 day break on the need for water, for irrigation.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but I guess it goes maybe back to Ken's point about water being a commodity. I mean, your analogy to the gas increase, that's because of the oil bacon. I mean, it's not because in battery technology and, Elon Musk, succeeding with electric cars and maybe just technology and engineering catching up with that thing. If the president doesn't want to build a pipeline for the bacon down to Texas, he should build a water line from behind Grand Coulee Dam and create a network of irrigation. That would allow us to have a water grid. That would make it more of a commodity, which would be, monitored on a West Coast basis. I mean, sure, we can do some things here, but if we go to all these onerous codes and then that happens and all of a sudden we don't have to do that as much, how do we backtrack from all the codes and city, actions of the city council to sort of go back and cherry pick some of the things off of here. I mean, I don't say that the list is bad. I think some of the motivation should be good. I just think that at some point, we should be, this list, instead of being huge, there should be 4 or 5 things that may be more carrot and stick oriented rather than just stick oriented.
Well, you already have the stick. I mean, that's the whole point of commodities trading, right, which is the price. And so the stick is there, whether it's in the form of people having to pay a lot per unit or having to pay a fine. So you have that. The question, I think, to your point, is, because I don't know that there's a way to universally, I don't think we're going to have a council of water evaluations going to say what's the right amount and what's the wrong amount. The question is, what is identified waste, and can we make it ubiquitous that people are fighting waste? So obviously, if lawns don't need to be watered because water came out of the sky, then that would be considered waste, right? And so you would say if people leave their water running for long periods of time while they're washing dishes or walking away from a sink that has dishes in them, that's probably waste, right? So that's where I think you start to attack the waste. The issue of carrot and stick is all handled by price, right? You can penalize people all different kinds of ways with price, and you can control it just like you can gasoline with price. Penalties, raising the price, surplus fees, are all kinds of ways that you can motivate people to use less.
Right, but the double meters,
No, I'm just, your question of, there are 4 or 5 things. There are things that you can do. I mean, ultimately, the enforcement of this is going to come down to, this is civil, not criminal. It's going to come down to the enforcement of either raising fees to cover the water that's consumed until such time as there is no water. And well, I mean, that's it. We are connected to an ecosystem, so there will be, if there's water in the other parts of Southern California, there'll be water in Sierra Madre. It will cost more.
Necessarily.
Okay, well.
Someone has to be willing to sell it to us.
I'm reasonably
belongs to someone
convinced in an interlocked market-based economy that there'll be buying and selling of water. The price will go up.
Well, let me.
Not necessarily.
But here's one of the things, we did buy water from MWD, and you saw the problems that it created because it's chlorinated in a different manner. And it's not the water that Sierra Madre was used to, because Sierra Madre used to have wonderful water. And what I kind of do object to is, yes, you're right. I believe that in the end you are going to, that's what you described as what's going to happen. But I do object to people who are rich saying, well, I'm going to take your water, and you're going to get whatever is left over.
But yes, that would go to the issue of unfairness. I was speaking to the issue of whether there is ways to drive down the consumption. There are ways to drive down consumption. One way to drive down consumption is by price.
Yeah.
Another way to drive down consumption is to make the community aware of what waste is and how to eliminate waste, because waste, generally speaking, is something that we can understand. We can understand that whether you want a lush lawn or don't want a lush lawn, if it rained last night, you don't need to water the lawn. You don't need to leave the water running while you're shaving or while you're,
Right.
putting toothpaste on your tooth. So those are things, those are behaviors that people can understand that have significant impact. So you look at, you can do all these other things, and you can require people to spend money on this, and require people to spend money on that. You can incent them to change their landscaping. You can give them incentives to do that. I don't think you can cause them to pay money to change it. You can put restrictions on them at time of change of sale, change of ownership, there are things
Right.
like that. But I think when you start with the easy ones, I think as the price goes up, just like it did with gasoline, generally speaking, the way it does with most commodities, consumption gets driven down. Then yes, if there are a few people who simply don't care what the price is and will pay whatever it is, fine, those people will exist in a society. I don't know what you do about that. But the issue of, you can help people understand what waste is and you can eliminate waste, that's a good place to start in terms of some of the simple things that you can do. And I don't know that we're doing as good a job as we could explaining that to people.
Right.
I completely agree with Manish. I don't think a little brochure sitting in the lobby is going to get people to,
No.
change vast behaviors.
The outreach is going to have to be more aggressive.
Yeah.
I also think the other place to start is with any new construction and major renovations on buildings and looking at restrictions on landscaping when that happens.
And
I think that there,
You have
there's
discretion
obvious.
there.
You have this, it's new, and I think that it's really important that when we approve projects that have landscaping involved, I mean, we had a project come to us that went up on Santa Anita,
Mhm.
which had like acres of grass. I was like, what are you thinking? People should not be putting in, it was a huge lawn in there that just shouldn't be allowed at this point. You shouldn't be having people put in lawns. You should have, we really should look at, in new construction and when we're, approving projects of renovations to say, okay, look, these are the requirements for new landscaping. I think it's really important because that's where the majority of water is going.
Yeah.
And you can do things that can be beautiful and be lush and not use that much water. It's possible, it's known how to do it, the information is available out there. It's not rocket science.
I mean, I think we do need to look at a set of policies or implementations that are strategically around the home, like from the very fabric of what we build, to how we situate it in the landscape or the property, and what that means, and I know I remember we had a discussion a while ago about how much of a front yard can be paved and not, because we didn't want people with full concrete
Green
front
con-
yards, right?
concrete, yeah.
So we said only 50%, and now that kind of stands to contradictory to what we're facing now, where we'd want a fully permeable front yard with, I guess the best front yard would be decomposed granite or some sort of gravel, right? But, so, we've got to parse through those kind of things in light of what we're facing now. And, I mean, I think there's something to this, designing smarter homes, and I think the technology is becoming more and more available. I mean, there are controllers now where it's Wi-Fi enabled, and so it's not even something you plug in, it sits straight in your planter or in the middle of your lawn, and
It
you can
senses
actually
the need.
control it from your phone, and it'll give you an alert when there's moisture or whatever. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things, but the point being, like, I think there's no reason for us to not look at the ways in which we design and build the home and then the surrounding, and so policies that would benefit that. I don't see that as something that's short-term for our moment now. I don't see why we're not doing that
From now
to
on.
better the housing stock moving forward. I think some of the things like the double meter, to me, that kind of, you're putting a requirement on. But, I think that also, in that very example, goes to kind of the cost, right? So if we had a meter that charged you a different rate for outdoor watering versus indoor use, like, there you go. Like, what do you value? What do you want? You want to pay market rate to water your outdoor, plants? Sure. Like, and if there's a meter that allows us to monitor that, that becomes a choice at that point, and so I think,
Well, I think that goes directly to what Bob was saying. That's going to happen in the state of California. As the cost of water soars, the discretionary choice to have a lush green front lawn, which is going to cost as much as your mortgage payment, is going, yes, some people will still do it, and some people will still drive Ferraris that get, 14 miles to the gallon, but fewer will.
Yeah.
I mean, that will, and this is not, yes, we're all talking about it now because it's in the news, but to Gina's point, we've been having droughts in California, to the grapes of wrath, okay? This is the state of California. It doesn't have a lot of,
1880s.
well, I mean,
we don't have natural, particularly Southern California. All of our water comes from somewhere else. And so the answer is there are more people living here, the population is stable and not significantly decreasing. And so, yes, if that is a fixed commodity, the price is going to soar and soar and soar. And so, yes, you'll keep it for your bathtub, and you'll keep it for your toilets, and you're not going to be able to afford it for your lawn, and you'll stop, just like people aren't driving, 19 mile per gallon cars anymore. They want 29 and 39 mile per gallon cars, because that's what they can afford.
I mean, to that point too, like another obvious thing, like the idea of lawns is not indigenous to this region. Like, this is something that's like a square.
The
in
idea of
a circle.
19-mile-per-hour cars was an invented idea to create wealth for certain individuals, okay? You don't need to have 19 mile per gallon cars, okay? You can have them, but you don't need them.
I just don't, I think that idea of that we all deserve and should have lush green, blue fescue in the backyard or whatever it is. I
If
just
that's
think
the way
it's-
people want to spend their money and their
That's-
allocation of water,
Agreed,
then,
but
then that's fine, but they need to understand that there's only so much water. And even though you say it's a commodity and we'll get a lot more, that, at the end of the day, I think there's, the city has a water supply, and it can be backed up with additional, but that's not the optimum position.
But I think, I mean, and we're probably talking in circles here, but the point is, I don't think we can just leave it to like, well, we let the market dictate what the price is. We segregate out what costs more, what costs less, to change behavior, or you decide if you want to pay $50 a unit, to water your lawn or whatever. But I think there has to be the other approach, which is the other side of the coin, which is that education of, there's other ways to do this that
And pushing.
that are beautiful, that
Pushing
are
people to be more
different.
efficient with the water that they do get.
And to clarify, I didn't say that we'll get a lot more. I said we're part of a larger ecosystem
Yeah.
where it'll be allocated across the ecosystem. We're not
Yeah.
isolated.
I think we got that in the minutes.
Yeah.
Danny, do you need to walk away from tonight with us coming with a priority number for each item?
No,
Just any
I'm-
additional items you.
I'm not, really just, this discussion's helpful to me, and I think just to the city in general.
Okay.
Really what will happen is, we'll go to the city council at their meeting on August 12th. We're asking them to make some priorities to this list.
Okay.
Well,
And,
I think,
um,
can we go back to sort of the top level? Because I think I feel like we strayed off of the important part of the conversation, at least as it applies to the planning commission, okay? So we have a 45-day moratorium, and ostensibly, if it's approved, a 2-year moratorium, and we're supposed to come up with some policies during that time to mitigate excessive water use going forward. Well, we know there are a number of building projects that are going to come before us, either during the 2 years or shortly after the 2 years. And I think your point is very germane here, which is, what is our discretion to impose certain restrictions on those new projects before they are approved? And a good example when we were talking about Carter was they voluntarily, to their credit, said that they would impose on themselves a gray water system, which I think we all found to be a pretty good idea. I don't know if it's the only idea, but it was not a bad idea. But we're going to be looking at other projects after that as well. And I think what we want to say is, also to your point on the future vision of the city, which is what the general plan is, okay, fine, what's happened, we can change a certain amount of things at change of ownership. But for new things that are going to be built, we are going to require, when this moratorium is over, this, and this, and we are going to feel good about that. And to the extent there needs to be a public hearing about that, to the extent that the costs on that need to be vetted, to the inconveniences to certain owners need to be vetted, I think it all needs to be vetted here, because what I think we're charged with as a planning commission is coming out of here with a set of guidelines that, coming out of the moratorium, now apply to new construction. And I think that's where we need to focus. So to me, this is a great laundry list of stuff that may or may not get us into water use within what is available, but I think we definitely have the discretion to vet a series of policies that we as a planning commission can apply to new projects that come before us.
And I think
That's where we should start. So whether that's, I'm being draconian, no new pools in Sierra Madre, okay? I don't know that that would go over very well, but it's something that we might want to talk about. Mandatory gray water systems, mandatory low flush, blah, 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 no more than so many bathrooms, whatever. But that's what I think we got to come out of here with, because that is the point of the moratorium. The point of the moratorium is to get ahead of the next wave of construction,
And
I
think
believe.
this is a launching pad for that. I mean, this is a brainstorming list of things that will go to that stage where we will start to hopefully vet these in a more detailed manner.
Right, but I think to the extent that it's legal and within our discretion, I think that a list of those things that we could impose and that the public can weigh in on should be heard during the moratorium period, and by the time we're at the end of the moratorium period, that should be in the code. So that makes our job real easy. No, you can't do that.
And the list should be what we think all new houses should contain in order to address the water supply for the city of Sierra Madre.
And not contained.
Right. And
I
not,
mean, I think along these lines, I think the design guidelines for the One Carter project have landscaping design guidelines in it, right? And part
They do.
of that landscaping is lower water use
Mhm.
plants. I mean, we already have gone in that direction on that project.
Yeah,
And I think it's not as far as I probably would like to see it go.
yeah.
But that we have, we have thought about some of this before. And I think that going forward along these lines of, what do we want to do? There are all these things that we've already spent, the
Right.
commission and the city has spent some time thinking this through already, along the lines of that project and sort of, expanding that kind of stuff that we thought about
And-
to all new construction makes.
and those same guidelines get applied to the major remodel where the guy tears down 3 walls and, rebuilds the whole house,
I
Because
mean,
that,
we
to
have
me, is pretty much no different than a,
New house, yeah.
Because we have a 50% thing on remodels, don't we?
Correct.
Yeah.
yeah, if it's
Usually
more than
goes to
50%, they have to put in
valuation,
as
right?
fire sprinklers, so.
Well,
Evaluation based?
it is physical and,
Valuation.
or valuation.
Okay.
We've applied the physical. It's difficult, and in some cases, working with our structural engineer, we apply the valuation.
Okay.
But it gives it that option.
So it's probably premature because the council hasn't met and extended the
Right.
moratorium, but such a time as they do, we should probably agendize a discussion
Definitely.
of potential new restrictions on new construction or on significant
soon do you
remodel.
think
Well,
we
this list, and why I wanted you to see it, is really a preview of what this commission's gonna be working on. Some of these, and maybe a lot of these,
Yeah.
are gonna be working on, the council's obviously gonna look to the planning commission and to staff to develop and, create some possible standards, and we'll want the discussion to occur at this level and with the public, involved. But, we'll certainly kind of, define what exactly they are and how they fit. And if it means like, okay, well, we're gonna have a whole landscaping, section of the R1, and then we'll prescribe what those standards will be. That's the kind of level we're gonna be dealing with.
Danny,
As an
because
example.
looking at this, I mean, when you look at it on service 22 and a half months or whatever, if it were to be extended, isn't a lot of time in the world of creating policy and.
I think we have to be,
drafting things.
I think we have to be realistic, we certainly know that that's, when the moratorium was put in effect, staff already knew that, we were gonna have marching orders as to, that's the whole reason why the moratorium was put in place. It's a pause on new construction, new development, but again, to address, our water emergency situation. So we're obligated to come up with policies that we implement.
Right, but I'll go with Bill on this one, which is, because it probably really is the 80-20 and probably the 90-10 rule here, I'd love to see 4 or 5 pretty easy to understand ideas that we could adopt as policy to new construction that would get a lot of the waste out of it. I don't know that we need to go, to 27 pages of regulations, but we had 4 or 5 ideas that were pretty well spelled out and said, new construction will not do this, 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 or this. I think in 22 months, we can probably get those through.
And it
But-
may already
Take
exist
more
in
than 4 or
somebody
5.
else's. in some
I
other
think it'll take
city.
a lot more than
So,
just 4 or
Well,
5.
yeah,
I'll start with
for
4 or 5.
Going back to Gina's,
I
what
think
other
it's more.
cities have ordinances already in place?
We'll look
I
at
mean,
that.
if you
Well-
went to Palm Springs or whatever, I don't know,
That's something I was gonna ask.
Santa Cruz, I
Or
think,
Santa-
or Santa
you know.
Barbara, some of the coastal places which have.
And I have to
very
tell you,
little
some of this, I think, and I haven't completely did research, but some of this is breaking new ground, surprisingly, I
Or
think.
Well,
places
so
in Arizona. where
here's-
they're-
Right, you'll
Here's
find that.
something I wanted to ask you on one of the, it says implement stricter green building code requirements related to water costs. So right now, in our world, there's a lot of yelling and praising, I guess, depending on what side of the coin you are, with the new Title 24, the new codes that
Oh, yeah.
have come in.
Yeah, we hear that.
And to the point where, we've dubbed it the new state mandated Title 24 requirements and the green building code, for residential even, is to a point where it's almost on the par of, if you're familiar with LEED certification, almost mandating a silver level LEED equivalent. And so I would love to see us, because there's a lot of things that are just required now that weren't required.
weren't
And I come up
required
with
just
it
over a year ago.
every day, where how you deal with rainwater now. Before it was, send it, make sure it leaves your property in a proper manner, but now you've got to retain it on site and things like that that are already in the code. I'd love to see us look at that to see if there's ways we don't just meet that, but we can exceed it.
Right.
And there are opportunities there.
The Title 24, when they had the California Green Building Code in place, there initially were tiers.
Yeah.
And cities had the option to go beyond what was mandated minimally by the state to adopt. And most cities just minimally took that and didn't take those tier options. Well, those tiers still exist, and when it relates to water conservation, perhaps we can even go to that extent. I think some of the discussions then were how onerous they would like, that they want their own, builders and residents that they must go through, but that is certainly something we
I
can
think
look at.
we should look at those tiers, because what now they're requiring even us to do is you have a green checklist that's part of the plans.
Right.
And those checklists are vetted by the jurisdictions as far as, do you have these 10 items? And it's a big sheet that's got all these things from low flow. I mean, it's one of those things too, like, we require low flow, and that's a requirement. There may be ways to even beat that with new construction, requirements. And so, I mean, I think those tiers are a great place to start and start looking at if there's things we can
Sure.
mandate.
It's a really good idea.
But I mean, to your point, I think there are probably 4 or 5 things, but I think you gotta look at it.
I'm not saying that's exhaustive, I say
No.
we can get those definitely.
Yeah,
done.
but I think you gotta look at it kinda like, in my opinion, you gotta look at, when it comes to new construction, the structure and what we're building.
Mhm.
And then also,
And
the
I think the
surrounding.
architects are right. There are lists that exist, and there are standards that exist that make it easy for them to do their job, and that's the things that we should grasp and already have, so that,
Well-
we're not asking people to try to be clairvoyant onto our desires, that, okay, this is industry standard, and we're just going to take it, and that's part of the list.
And to that point, like, I think what happens on the street, on the ground, is these checklists or these requirements are things that are vetted with clients. So as far as, when you're building a new house, it's not coming out of thin air. These things are being discussed, like, when the house is this large, we're gonna have to install X, Y, and Z, or this requirement for lid, or SWIPs, or water runoff, or how do we retain that, smart metering, controllers, which are now, LA City has a great, I mean, their green checklist, like, you've gotta have smart irrigation controllers. It's just part of the deal, like, these lists are already circulating, and as you mentioned, these tiers, on the
Yeah.
green checklist. It'd be a great place to start to see what may fit or not fit.
Yeah, you can't get a building permit unless you meet the green code.
Well, which is required.
Yeah.
Which we do now,
Yeah.
here.
And it's only getting stricter, so that's another thing moving forward. All these, with the first green code moving to 2013, they're getting
Mm-hmm.
stricter, so.
I'd just like to add one other thing to this conversation, and this is sort of on the overall water usage thing. So when water reduction was required by the city, I got a number at my house, which was a percentage off. And a friend of mine got a number, which was, her lot is about the same size as mine, and hers was like 30% of mine. And I just think there's like a fairness issue here that we have to keep in mind, that we want to get people to restrict water, but we want to make sure that how it's applied has it's not arbitrary. And I think that all these things we're talking about are really good ideas, but we just want to make sure that it's along the lines of, can people afford this? Is it rational? Is it I think that is kind of a part of what the issue is. Yeah, you can say, oh, it's all about the mark and stuff, but that's not it's not the only thing, because there is.
There were people gaming the systems. They knew when the baseline was gonna be, and so they used a lot of water, and then if, 50% of that is well within.
They happened to be, their house happened to not be occupied that period.
Right, then they were
Because it was
screwed.
rented out and the renters had moved out, and so there was just a little sprinkling going on, and so they got this dinky little number, which they managed to get up, but,
Yeah.
you just wanna make sure we avoid that kind of issue that, pushes people who are whatever, fixed incomes or whatever people want. Just these kind of issues have to be in the back of someone's mind while we're thinking about this stuff.
I don't know if we helped you or
No, you
not,
did,
but-
and I think, this is really, this list will go to the city council. I think, you'll find in the next several months, we're going to be bringing back particular items, and asking you for some policy direction. It'll be in the form of general plan amendments, because we have a general plan update, of course, we want to align that with completing the general plan update, so those things are going to come quicker, the general plan changes. But that also translates to zoning changes too. So, and again, this really was, again, for you to brainstorm, for you to, get your thoughts together and know that we're kind of, in the next 2 years, definitely, we're going to be coming back with request for policy direction.
Woohoo.
Are we ready to go to the second half, or second
Yeah,
part
the
of this
second half of
discussion?
this, yes.
Yeah, this is the implementation program, and going back to the general plan, every city is required, when they're doing their general plan update document, is required to basically meet the goals and objectives that correspond to the policies that you place in your general plan, and that's by way of doing an implementation program. It includes action items, and those can be in the form of zoning ordinance changes or revisions, creation of new ordinances, and other programs or regulations that city staff will develop and implement. Our general plan goes to 2035. It's sort of the vision of that. So the implementation program is a matrix, and we have examples here that that shows that we're setting targets to complete some of these action items. And it also includes the responsible city department and, as I mentioned, the time period in which we would target to complete it. The Planning Commission, what we have before you is, first of all, what the General Plan Steering Committee completed. They were tasked to complete the implementation program, and at the time that they did that, they had decided to disband and not continue to work. And we showed you an example here as an exhibit, an implementation program that was done by Agora Hills. In fact, our technical consultant helped us in showing us what an example is. And what staff would like to do is take this example and use it as a model to complete the implementation program. I'm not asking you this evening to review the implementation program that was prepared, but really letting you know that, staff will complete it. It is an extensive document, and we're beginning to complete, or beginning the work in doing that. If you have any direction at this time in looking at the example for Agora Hills about how this is to be done, we could take that this evening, but we wanted to make sure that, to let you know in the direction we were going, so that when we come back with sections of the implementation plan, you know the direction we're going in.
So, Danny, can you, off the bat, I'd like to hear from you. I see the Gura Hills implementation program, but
Right.
up above is sort of our template or gridded out objective policy or objective. So then the goal is to break these objectives and policies down to their next level, which is implementation, right?
It's actually action items. So it's not taking the policy that's written in the general plan and transferring that policy here. it's creating an action item and then tying them to those policies that are in the general plan. So you'll see how, in the Agora Hills, it says implement which policies, and they're all numbered.
Mhm.
If you recall, the policies in the general plan were all numbered.
Yes.
So the idea was, whatever that action item is, ties to that policy. And it may not, we may be able to group 5 or 6 or 8 policies together and say, revise the R1 zoning standards regarding front yard setbacks, and that will capture all those 8 policies that were.
So do we have the action items?
You do not have the
No,
action item.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
now, we don't have it, but do we
That's
have
fine.
those developed or do those
No,
exist?
We would have to create them.
So you're
That's
in the
what staff-
process of doing.
Right, staff would do that.
Dang.
Yeah, that's a huge thing.
It's a huge thing, yeah.
It's really huge.
It's huge,
And it's like the most important part in a way. I mean,
right?
you have this overarching thing, but nothing's gonna happen unless you have the actual action items, so this
So the
is-
action items being created.
And how is the action, how are the action items measured is gonna be the other crucial thing. By completion? In other words, you're gonna say, we're going to revise the following,
And we'll set a date when we, these are in
Some may be
5-year
ongoing.
increments. But we will, it really is where the rubber meets the road in terms of
Mhm.
implementing your general plan. It's not
Yes.
just these vision statements you're putting in a document, you're
Mhm.
creating a,
So how does,
Worksheet.
how does that work? Are you, I mean, obviously you're working on them, but is
Right.
it something like the general plan in the sense of you create a series of these action items and then they're we talk about and review them, or is it just like you
Yeah, I mean,
complete it and then?
my suggestion, I don't think it would be in your interest to sit here and, wordsmith it out, but that staff staff develops this, and we'll get, each meeting of the general plan, of each first meeting of the month, we'll do as far as we can, and we'll show you, and we'll keep giving you sections. This is a city-wide effort because other department, are involved. For example, library will have their own set of
Action.
implementation measures. Public Works will.
Fire, police.
when it
So
comes
you
to-
don't have to write all of them.
We don't have to write all of them,
Department.
but
But
it
you're
does get vetted
coordinating 'em.
here, and we coordinate, we're like the coordinating house,
Yeah.
our department is, and then.
You're the
It'll
architect.
come
A lot of
before
it is
you.
like, it's like shopped out or to different departments.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's a good idea, because this to me just is basically the headlines of the general plan pasted into an Excel spreadsheet, which I don't find particularly,
helpful.
I don't know what you do with it. I mean, it's a long
Well, it
spreadsheet.
tells you how much you need to cover for action items.
Right, it's scope.
It's
but-
daunting.
But it's not, well, yeah, but you can read the general plan and see that it's daunting. This is just
Yeah.
cut and pasted in a different format. But the question I have is, how do you develop an action plan in absence of some knowledge of budgetary impact? Because everything has a cost, whether it's a human service cost or a material cost.
Mhm.
Budget's a moving target. Budget is on an annual basis, and we already know, based on some recent legislation, that the budget's going to get cut. So how do you write an action plan, particularly one that's more than 12 months long, without having some,
Knowing the
yeah,
feasibility
knowing what
or-
kind of money you have to spend?
And that's a very good question, again, you're trying to achieve the goal, the goals you've placed in your general plan, and realistically, a lot of them are policy decisions that are being made by this city council and future city councils. It's,
But you can't
Yeah.
commit to take actions that aren't funded.
right, and so sometimes in this implementation program, there may be,
Contingent on budget,
implementation measures are
contingent on budget.
contingent on budget, contingent upon the policies and the will to do these things.
Well, but you also have prioritization, right? So the city council is gonna pass a budget, then they're gonna pass another budget, and then they'll see what the tax revenue is, and they'll pass another budget. But they're gonna prioritize
They're gonna-
the implementation of city programs. It's not a decision that you make or the library makes in a vacuum. They have to say, this is where the money's gonna go, and then you go, great, well, we wanna do this, and you go, great, but the city council didn't prioritize that.
And I
So
think-
how do you reconcile that?
Well, I think this also serves to this city council and future city councils that when they are looking at their budget, they need to refer back to these goals, and then you say, well, we need to factor these things in our budget program.
So is part of your action plan gonna be a rough estimate of expense?
No. it is
Time
not.
frame, but not.
Time frame, but expense is not included here. Yeah, that-
I don't know how you
those are
can
gonna be-
commit
yeah,
to
I
a
mean, those are-
program if you don't know how much it costs and if you don't know that you have the
But
money to
does
do
the-
it.
There's absolutely no way to predict how much
I
money there's gonna
understand.
be over the next 20 years.
completely
So, this is a policy document. Policy
That's not what
documents
he's
need.
talking about.
No,
Well,
but
it
the
is- that
action,
is a
no,
it's-
but the
it's
action items aren't
policy-
required,
It's a policy document in terms of the action items as well, which says,
yeah.
these are the actions we would like to. Now, if you look at the old general plan, not all those things were accomplished, right? A lot of them were not accomplished. This is how plans are. You make a plan. This is the best of all possible worlds. We'd like to do all this stuff.
It's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement. We're hoping it happens. These are the things that in our vision we want to happen. We're not gonna cut things out because we say, well, we don't have the money this year, because we don't know what's gonna happen in 5 or 10 or 15 years.
It's not gonna cost you money to create the policy, it's gonna cost you money to implement the policy. So you can you can make the decision and say, this is what our goal is, and then if they can't afford to do it, then that's on them.
This is goal setting.
It's staff time that's gonna cost money, you
It's
know.
about goal setting.
But is some of the goal setting, couldn't it be a prioritize of what we want to put money towards?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's also,
Absolutely.
it's given a timeline, right, in terms of, these are
given a
more
timeline.
short-term versus ongoing or long-term, or,
Yeah,
Um,
and I just think, yeah, sure, these things cost money, but for us to say, I don't think it's our place to say, no, you can't do this because we don't think there's money. That's like a policy level thing that's gonna happen over the next 20 years. So it doesn't
My
happen now, it
question
happens
was,
later.
what framework do you lay across it to allow yourself to be able to make those decisions? When every decision that you're making is a trade-off on another financial decision?
they're
That's
not
my question
making, they're
is-
not making that
Certainly they
decision.
are.
Yeah.
No.
Certainly
they're-
they are.
They're setting.
They're saying we're going to do
implementation.
this in this period of time, and we're gonna do this in this period of time. That's
I
an
don't-
action plan.
They're
That's
saying-
I
not-
don't think any of
We're
it
going
says
to
we
set
are
the goal
going to
to
do
do
this. It is, give us an example of an action item, a concrete action item on a policy, where it would say, we will be doing this in 2015,
Well,
July.
the city shall update the hillside
Map.
development standards relating to,
Water usage.
water usage. The city shall develop dark sky ordinances, a dark sky ordinance, by
2016.
2016.
Yeah, but it's-
And
and all
what
of that you're
is-
saying,
The major commitment that is staff time and/or consultation.
you're saying
which
shall,
costs money.
so at
Shall.
some point, a decision can be made whether to do that or not to
Right,
do that.
It'll be subject to policy
Which
discussion.
may have a
to
which would
determine-
have a
right.
cost, but.
But you have to understand that that's saying, the general plan has set visions and goals and policy, visions and, goals and objectives. You're only carrying out what your general plan is saying. And if it's not, if in 2016, the city and the community feels it's no longer a goal we want to achieve, then that's the time to, you amend your general plan and say, that's not, we may have been thinking about it in 2014, but we don't care about it in 2016. I mean, I know that's only 2 years from now,
Or
but.
maybe in 2016, we realized we didn't have the money to do it, but we still want to keep that in the plan because in the
Right.
next 18 years, we may get the money to do it. Because money comes and goes, and the idea about policy about how much people want to tax themselves come and go. And so we may have more money in the future.
It's more
We can't make that
aspirational than
plan, yeah.
functional.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, we want to be
I
our
mean,
best.
there would be no
we wanna
way
be
for
our
you to
best
create
community. We're
action
not gonna
items
say we
if
have the
you
money
had to
do
take
it.
into account what is the fiscal impact of this action
I
5 years from now, or you would make no action items.
But,
Yeah,
but
it's
still,
on
for
your
some
own.
of these, you're going to need support. Your staff can't do it by itself, and you're gonna need to go to the city council and say, you need to allocate X amount of money for
Right.
contractual support.
Perhaps.
To come up with this, and if they say, well, no, we can't do it, then,
Right.
okay, well then,
I mean, there has been a movement, in the planning world that general plans become too complex and too voluminous and to simplify them because sometimes the goals are just way too lofty but others feel that, it's a statement of the city's vision and
aren't they required though, general plans?
they are required.
Yeah.
But there's a concern that, that perhaps maybe they've become too overly complex. I'm not saying ours is. I think we have a very good start of the general plan update. But it's a matter of, it's required by state law that we actually prepare an implementation program. It doesn't require us to implement everything on there.
Right. It's aspirational as opposed
Right.
to dictatorial or
Right.
directional.
And it serves as a guide.
And it serves as a guide for
for-
future,
Right.
In some ways, it's like a menu,
but it still costs money,
Yeah.
Right.
you know.
Are we done with this?
So I don't know, I mean,
And I'm not asking you for any direction particularly at this point.
I mean,
but-
off the cuff, the example here was fairly easy to understand. I mean, there's only one page.
It's an
but-
excerpt,
But it's an
yeah.
excerpt, but I mean, you had your land use, your action item, and then your which policies it was implementing, and then who's the responsible party, and then kind of this way you had your timeline. So, I mean, it seemed user-friendly and easy to understand. I don't know how it would look when you have 2,041 action items, policies. I mean, I don't, it looks pretty as a one-page thing, but I'm sure it's gonna.
And again, we hope that we'll be able to, we'll be able to combine and lump a number of policies into one, action item.
I guess I think that the sort of point of this is, it's not to get to the level of minutia, right? It's still at a level of policy,
Mhm.
even though it's action-related, it's not, this little tiny
Right.
level of action.
And the good news with the moratorium is we'll have plenty of time to deal with it.
Right.
Well, we don't know how long that's gonna be, though.
Yeah, I mean, this made sense.
I'm, in all seriousness, the idea of using one of our sessions or carving out specific time to deal with this on a regular basis and not saving it up till, and even, and before when I was on it, if we had, special meetings in order to, chew through whatever it needed to be, we need to do it.
Okay.
I don't think this commission should be the bottleneck in terms of getting it out.
Well, the way we did the general plan, I think,
What?
worked well.
I think it worked very well.
But to that point, is there a step before, there may be revisions to the general plan and some of the objectives and policies that we've outlined based on, water use or whatever,
Right.
like certain sections may get, does that determine when you dive into?
No,
or is it
we
the
can be-
sections that are set, you're kind of?
We can go ahead and begin if we
Okay.
need to make amendments to what we've prepared,
Okay,
but we're not waiting,
got it.
yeah.
I mean, I think the way we did that was great. We did it in chunks.
Mhm.
and It was a standing thing at every first meeting, so.
If I may, the very last item I'd like to just run by you is Exhibit D, and this is your review schedule. It's, the council has asked, as well as, commissioners and the general public, just basically on, what is the schedule of review for the planning commission, for completing the general plan. If you look at the very bottom of this table on Exhibit D, it gives you a calendar of what we expect to bring back to you. At your September 4th meeting, we are going to begin to give you water policies to consider. And what staff will do is make recommendations for you to review, and you can determine whether they're good. We also will bring a progress of the implementation plan program. So staff will be working on that. In October, if you recall, when you reviewed the land use map, you had asked about some particular sections as to why the committee and why changes were made on the
Certain parcels.
on certain, land use designations. And we would like to bring that back to you then to finalize that, as well as more progress on the implementation plan, so staff will continue to keep working on it. And then your November 6th meeting is really trying to finalize everything. We hope that by November, we'll have completed everything before you,
Including the implementation.
including implementation. Now, water policies will still continue, but we hope that that your part in general plan is already done. Just, yeah,
Well, I mean, you can always amend the general plan
yes.
if we want to change certain things like relating to water.
Right, we can always do that. The EIR is something that the technical consultant has been working on it. However, they are at a point where they are kind of on hold, waiting for some direction from the city council. If you recall, there were build-out numbers that went before you and then did go to the city council. And city council has not given direction yet on the build-out numbers. And until they do, then the consultant then can finish the draft EIR, and there's a whole process in terms of it being available for public review. So that would happen simultaneously as we're finishing this. So there is an end to all of this. It's just, some of this, I can't predict exactly when that's going to occur, because some of it needs things to be completed and responded to before we can continue.
But as far as what you have here for final review, that's,
This
we're
is
still on target for?
Yeah, we've remained on target.
Okay.
From when we started this, and so this really is my wish on these dates to be,
Met.
carried through.
Okay. All right.
I think that's it for me.
That's it?
Yeah, on this, yeah.
Um, I don't know if we wanted to open a public comment for this item. I thought it was more of an.
You could just call for it.
I'm gonna go ahead and open this time to public comment, if there's any on this discussion item. Can you come up
Can you
to
come to
the
the
podium, please?
Please come to the podium.
State your name and.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Riorta. I've lived in this town all my life. I'd like to suggest a educational program in any of the educational facilities we have in town, or anywhere that has, or for anybody actually, in elementary schools, junior high schools, to sometimes, the paradigm shift for older people, it's a little harder for water conservation. You're used to certain kinds of baths and showers and letting the water run and watering your orchids or whatever. But when the kids get involved and the kids can kind of make the parents aware, and if they don't have to teach the kids these items, it's the slow leak, it's the small leaks that accumulate. It's not the new buildings, it's all the old buildings. It's like the leaky pipes, your valves to your houses that are leaking. Those all add up. I mean, it's a numbers game. So, I mean, water conservation is, it's like the little drips. And so the kids, if you can teach the kids something about water conservation, or just water in general, it's life. I mean, water is life. And you get them excited about it, get them involved, and teach them how to plant Native American or Native California plants instead of plants that don't naturally grow in the deserts around here. There's plants that are beautiful that will grow in this kind of climate. You might have to water them a little bit, but in drought situations, but not like a lawn. But it's just an idea, for the kids, and it's big ideas are great, but it's getting everybody involved from the different generations, because everybody's using the water. I mean, everybody uses water. Everybody is water. So it's the education part, I think, is the proactive part. The stick is great. The stick but its stick is there. It's reactive.
Yeah.
It is a deterrent, but it's a reactive thing. The proactive is education and doing something right this second. It's just like, I'm going to think about just being after this meeting, how how much I use that water just to put the toothpaste on there, just, just a drip, and then, just enough to maybe put the water in a cup instead of putting your mouth down on a running faucet. Just little things that you can teach that don't seem like big things, like, but it's the little things that all add up, and that's just my idea. So
Thank you.
that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are good comments.
Yeah, those are good.
Especially concerning, old buildings that are leaking, There are a lot of them. How many running toilets right now are out there in the city that are leaking water?
Just reminds me of the pipe in I'm always mentioning this, but it's the water pipe the water main on my street. It breaks every 2 weeks.
It's not just your street.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's gotta be not just my block, but all over town, and this is another,
Our
way
street's
that
a
water-
red line on the map.
yeah.
They're out there every week.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I mean, it's like, that's another way that
That's a whole
water's
nother-
being used in town.
All right. Well, we'll bring it back to the commission here. And let me see.
You can consider that was
Yeah.
oral communication, so.
Yep, that's our oral communication. So, back to the planning commission.
I have something.
Any comments, concerns?
Welcome back, Bob.
Yeah, welcome back, Bob.
A week from this Saturday, the Los Angeles County Department of Hazardous Waste is doing a hazardous waste pickup
Oh, good.
in Sierra Madre. And it's an excellent opportunity for you to get the hazardous waste out of your houses so that when there's an earthquake or a fire, you will be less likely to die from exposure to the stuff that's underneath your sink. And so paint, light bulbs, CFL light bulbs, all those things that we don't want to go into the landfill, and also the things that make you, provide a hazard for you and your family, put them in the trunk of your car, drive down there, and they'll take it away for free.
Where and when did you say?
It's on Mariposa. It happens every year in town. It's not on the city calendar, but the city did send these out, apparently with a water bill or something. But it probably should be promoted more by the city, but it's on Mariposa every year. And they take over the parking lot. And you can, all the old paint, all the old, chemicals that you have sitting in your house.
Is this back parking lot here? It's not the city.
No, it's the Mariposa lot behind the
Oh.
bottle shop and that area.
Oh.
Right there. The parking lot back there.
So, do your best to make your house safer for yourself and, the rest of the community.
Development services, Danny?
Your next meeting is August 21st, and we actually have a full agenda on August 21st. We have up to 5 items. So, one is one of the Stonegate 1 Carter homes is coming back to you. And a number of other items. I don't need to get into detail here, but it's up to 5.
Is that the one that was continued?
Yes, yes. That's it.
Great, thank you, Danny. I think that concludes it, so.
Yeah.
With that, we are adjourned.